concludes the author. And now I'm going into the summary. Personally, I do a hybrid translation between the machine translation and some of my personal grammatical English edits. I mostly just do light touches though. Most of this, I really want to keep it in the author's words, but with translation, sometimes, you do it for ease of clarity. So now here's the translation. In the year 2130, in the future, of course, 100 years from now, 120 years from now, at date of writing, the sun has gone out and the earth freezes over. Lu Yuan, one of the last survivors of the frozen era, returns to the year 2125. He has 5 years to change the future, relying on the auxiliary light brain. For some context, I'm going to interrupt with some of these. Auxiliary light brain you can come to as one of those microchips. It's like in AI that generally you help, or in web novels, a protagonist would attach to his brain for computing power. Just to do calculations. That has accompanied him back to the past. And Lu Yan's decision to save the world is he decides to use video games. Experienced web novels will know where this is going. The name of that video game is Tomorrow Hasn't Arrived, right? So that's the name. And the setting and the plot of the game is that it's set during the time after the sun has gone out. It's a post-apocalyptic game containing a lot of the tech that, so here the author included a lot of tech that he may or may not write about. The technology he includes is nuclear fusion technology, artificial intelligent robots. That's the literal translation. I put it as artificial intelligence and robots, moon bases, Martian cities, and everything that has not been completed in reality. The machine translation says will first complete their technical preview in the game. I translate it as will appear in the video game. But yeah, so the main point is the main character or protagonist inserts all these technologies in the video game. And what that does is scientists, students, skilled workers, singers, and even all people who have hope for the future choose to enter this game one after another because of all the technology inside and just due to the high quality of the video game. I'll get into how he does that later in the analysis. And the author's words is just like navigators running to the sea without regret. Pretty cool. And the last sentence the author writes on the summary is, Lu Yuan, the main character and protagonist, says, I put the future of mankind in this game. So I might have, I don't think I slipped up, but in the future I might do slip up in both the analysis and whatnot, and say that the main character, MC, or the protagonist is Lu Yan instead of Lu Yuan. And the reason why that's important is because Lu Yuan actually has an important meaning. The name always has important meaning. I'm never good at it, but this one I can recognize really easily. I would say Lu Yan because that's how I read it. But Lu Yuan has a special significance. So when I do the summary, I really want to make sure I get that correct. But just a future note, I might read that. I'm also just going to do a clean reading of the translation, maybe even a raw reading of the translation without my commentary, just so, if someone wants to read that, that'd be cool. I'll put that on BTS. So now, that's a complete summary. And like most stories, after a summary, there's always a couple tags. I like to give it a couple of my own tags, just so people have an idea of what this category is under. So this is a real quick timestamp of a couple tags. A couple tags I've assigned this is a semi-apocalypse novel. I'll explain why I call it semi. There are some elements of VR gaming, some intrigue, definitely intrigue involved. A Qidian search engine tag, I originally thought it would be classified under fantasy, Gaowu, or a high-tech, or a parallel world. Obviously, it's science fiction, but now doing some research, it's definitely science fiction set in a future world, the year 2130. But yeah, that's the search engine tag. The way that the author writes the character is that the MC, the main character, is a normal protagonist. Now why I say the author writes it, or at least I feel like his intentions as a normal protagonist. He's not placed in the category of genius. He's not like a super smart protagonist. He's not an OP protagonist like some of the Korean and Japanese protagonists. And he's not a moron. He's not what TV tropes and overly sarcastic productions might call a crouching tiger, hidden badass. No, he's not one of those. The way the author writes it is he's a normal protagonist with, some long experience and, experience from the future, of course, and but normal nonetheless. He's not a genius. and he gets around that by using a tech assistant. Um, really, he's a normal protagonist, but he's written in the Chinese elves trope. I'll explain most of that in chapter one of the in analysis of chapter one. But he gets around all that with a tech assistant, which is in the summary called an auxiliary light brain. And the auxiliary light brain, or the microchip controller, or whatever one might call that tech assistant, think of it like Jarvis from Iron Man. It's just a helpful AI, and it's really a tool to help assist the protagonist. And for some experienced web novel readers, this is not a system novel. The auxiliary light brain doesn't assign tasks. It's just a tool, a very useful tool with some high tech, but a tool nonetheless to help assist the protagonist in doing stuff. So yeah, and just one last couple tags is it's a love interest. There's some love interest involved, some romance and drama. That's really the last tag. Just like any good Chinese web novel or just novels in general, there's always some drama and romance, and that just adds another facet to a really good book. And so those are the tags. But I feel like it's really important to mention what this book is not, because that's how you get a sense of what it isn't. Now, this book is not a harem, right? This is not where the Chinese protagonist gets 3 girls. No. It's not that story. There's a couple, Chinese web novels, Japanese web novels. They have that, which really goes to show, the bar. But it's not that type of story, which I think says volumes about it. From what I read, I couldn't find any sense of. I felt it was absent of racism. Yeah, I think so. One particular moment that really caught my eye was that there was a really intelligent and smart black character. They praised a black character, and that's special. It really goes to show the bar as well. But it's interesting to see an author praise an intelligent black character. Plays a very minor role, but the fact that it mentions that is particularly special. The reason why is, some Asian and Chinese culture is that people are xenophobic. They've been afraid of black people. The excuse, obviously it's still an excuse, but the reasoning and the excuse that's been given is, like with most cultures and countries, I don't think every country has gotten rid of racism entirely. Nordic countries are quite, xenophobic. China's quite xenophobic. Asian countries are quite xenophobic. You've got Japan. UK at times can be. America's definitely not got rid of its own. Germany, and one group of people I don't want to advertise, the French, Italians, are xenophobic and racist, against African people and like Turkish, Islamic, Middle East, and Egypt and Turkey have their own sets of problems as well. But Chinese, Asian, and Chinese people have been historically afraid of black people, or at least that's the culture. And the excuse is, their technology has advanced, but their culture has not. And here I'm going on a little tangent here, but the idea goes that part of the things that reinforce cultural norms is technology, right? When you only have half the workforce in the workplace back in the 50s and 60s, and even previously, right? It was a very male, men-dominated workplace. Not a lot of genders in the workplace. And so when you really free up the workplace, not just for genders, but for race as well, like when black people entered the economy, when German, Irish, Eastern Romanian, Eastern European peoples entered the economy, Latvian, Mexican, South American, Spanish people entered the economy, you really start to get a boost in production. And when you open that workforce up to all genders as well, I was about to say both, but I feel like in this politically, just not the right term in the moment. When you open the workforce to all genders, right? What it does is it allows cultural norms to change, right? Because when productivity increases when people are treated equally, right? Like you can't just have men being treated specially, or even just race being treated specially, because that just doesn't increase productivity. It doesn't motivate people. So cultural norms change with technology, and the excuse and the reasoning behind China's cultural norms not being up to date or just being as sensitive as the modern world, or not even modern, just the Western world, is because their technology is quite advanced, but their culture has to take the time to advance as well. But historically, you can see some of that. See a male, I think a male author, and so it's not going to be a feminist novel, unfortunately, but it's not super. Male antagonist is like the the center of the story. No, it's not that story either. As I said, it's not a harem, so it's probably not going in that direction. And so because it's not that type of story, you see that a lot of the female characters get a sense of agency. They're independent, which is, special, especially in a lot of web novels and Chinese web novels in general. As I said, it goes to show the culture, but it's getting there. Yeah, a lot of these female characters, they don't depend on the MC. They revolve around it because you have a male MC, male protagonist. And I was surprised. I was surprised in a similar way, but in an opposite way than when I watched Indiana Jones for the first time recently. I knew the story, but I'd never watched it. And I was surprised at some of the cultural norms displayed in that movie. And it's just the complete opposite of that. Or you could even watch OSP, Overly Sarcastic Production, the video creator Red's take on Don Quixote. I'll probably save that for the analysis because that is kind of relevant. But yeah, female agency is a thing in this novel. And one last thing this isn't is I felt like this wasn't nationalistic. Again, Chinese people some Chinese people can be nationalistic, just like most, any American, German, British, or Russian person. Nationalism is just a thing. It's one of the things that come with patriotism. And the reason why I say that is because the American characters in this story aren't purely evil. Foreigners are not evil. The British people are not evil. I don't think there's any British, but it's just American, which is cool because, they focus on America. But, no one is purely evil. And there are even some decent American characters that aren't evil, because, foreigners can be some of the protagonists in Chinese novels and just stories in general. There are generally two types of Chinese villains. Accented Cinemas also did a story on this, video on this. There are foreigners, the British historically, sometimes French, but, French haven't really done much in China. Indochina, yeah, but not China. The British and more recently the Americans, just, antagonism and cultural conflict. But off the top of my head, the other villain would be Hanjie. It was what it would be known as. Chinese traders, traders of the same kind, or even just race traders. It's kind of like how Americans see Benedict Arnold, right? Really big trader to the country. So yeah, there are some American characters. There may be American characters and entities that are the main antagonists, but they aren't evil, right? They're antagonists in the way in the sense that they get in the way of the protagonist, the main character, right? And even then, he justifies it with good reason because he writes villains in the way that they all have their own agendas. This is a story where everyone has different agendas, and that's what causes conflict, not because people are evil and they don't like each other, or even racism. Although sometimes if there is, I didn't pick up on it. It's one of the first novels to feature, and I'd say an heroic American, but I think there's more than one, with even one or two supporting American characters, and that's surprising because you just don't see that. Like, I don't think there's a lot of American, even like American web fictions where actually you might, where you see like a Chinese secondary character. Asian, of course, Indian maybe, but I don't think I've seen that. Especially Asians and Chinese Asians and American and Western web fictions have not been portrayed in the kindest of lights, right? I think Accented Cinemas did another one on the Chinese female villain, which is cool, but maybe not the nicest light. And the way he writes it is he praises other countries, he praises America, and in doing so, he praises his own country as well, which some people might argue nationalism. And I definitely debate on that. I definitely debate you on that. But yeah, I think it's closer to patriotism, or categorized as patriotic spirit, because he doesn't make other countries look bad. He more just praises them, and in a similar sense praises his own country. Whether that's his intentions or not, I don't know, and I don't think it is. But one could argue. And then so back to some of the other tags. As I said before, there's some drama, but this is a weird apocalypse novel, and I'll elaborate more just like very, very quickly. It's a future world. It's set in the year 2130, and it's a science fiction novel, as I mentioned before. But the reason why I hesitate to call it an apocalypse novel, I call it semi-apocalypse. That's a term. It's because that type of novel, the Frozen era stuff, is really set in the background. That's more like world lore, world building, and it's put on the back burner with various descriptions in the video game and story. But they don't really elaborate that too much until really later on, and even then, it's only in bits and pieces. I'll even elaborate more on the overall drama aspect later on a different video. But because of the spoilers, it might make it into a different video. Very extremely minor, though. I think it's okay to be put in a summary video. And just some of the things, just one last thing this is not, and a couple